Good afternoon and welcome to our latest webinar in the Special Needs 101 webinar series. My name is Paul Dauphin. I am the Louisiana Director of Operations for the American Federation for Children, and I am very pleased to be joined by Tera Myers, our advisor for special needs families. Welcome, Tera.
Thank you.
And Tiffany Crawford with the Louisiana Federation for Children. She is our Director of Grassroots Operations. So welcome, and another important topic for us today. We are talking about the Individual Education Program, IEP, and really what parents need to know if their child has an IEP. And I'll turn it over to you, Tiffany.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, and hi, Tara. So glad that you're back. Always good to see you. This topic has kind of resonated with us because we have so many parents that call us and have questions about what do I do? How do I get the resources that my child needs? What are some things that I can do to ensure that my child gets what he's supposed to have, he or she's supposed to have? So glad to be doing the second part of our webinar series. So glad that you're here, Tara, because I know you come with a wealth of information. You were able to do some phenomenal things in Ohio. And so we are just so happy to have you and ready to get started to talk about the Individualized Education Program, better known as the IEP. So Tara, I'll turn it over to you. What do we need to know about this IEP and what kind of rights do our children and our parents have?
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Nice warm welcome. It's great to be back. And yes, the IEP is really an important document for individuals with disabilities within our public school systems. And also equally as important if children are involved in a choice program. Most choice programs for individuals with special needs require the student to have an IEP from their home district. There are differences based upon the state and where you're at, but most of them require some connection to that IEP. So it's really important. And one of the hard things is that when parents find out that their child has a diagnosis or that they need help, they're overwhelmed. And then they get introduced to a whole plethora of acronyms, and one of them being this Individualized Education Program, and who writes it up, and how does that actually come into play, and what role does the parent play? And unfortunately, over the years, there's not really been a whole strong effort across the board for parents to really have an equal say. That's not to say that's in every school system, but I hear from countless parents how they just are left kind of helpless when it comes to it. Oftentimes the school district just prepares things and tells the parents what's going to happen. And really the rights are that the student and parent have input, and they are equal members of that IEP team. So I think we're going to go over that a little bit. I've got 5 quick little tips for just kind of getting yourself ready for that meeting after you found out that your child has a diagnosis. And then I'll cover just a couple sections that I think are so important for the parent to really pay crucial attention to help make it go smoothly, but also to really be an individualized program for their child and take away some of that intimidation.
Well, I'm so excited about that, and I'm also glad, and I want to encourage parents to go and look at the first webinar series because you gave some important tips on what you need to prepare for, how to be organized, and how to prepare yourself to be able to be an important member of this process. And so I'm going to encourage our viewers to please go back. You can look at our Louisiana Federation for Children page on Facebook. You can also look for our Louisiana Parent Network that has the information about the first webinar series, because it is really some great information and it prepares you for the 5 steps that Tara is about to talk about. And so I guess, Tara, with that, we'll start with our first step. What is our first step?
Well, our first step is to really be prepared, parents. I think that when you attend your child's IEP meeting, whether you're doing it in person or online, a lot of schools have gone virtual, that you just come on time, come ready with ideas and questions that you may have about your student or what the process is going to be, what kind of resources are going to be provided with the school, any concerns that you have. If you are not sure make a list of your questions. No question is a dumb question. It's worthy of being asked if you're not sure, and just really have an idea of what the needs of your child are. And if you're not sure, based upon that, the ETR meeting and telling you what is the basic needs from testing that your child has, ask again when you get there, and have that list prepared for you. That way that you can help put this plan together, and you can make sure that you can follow with knowledge of the progress that is happening for your student. If you took the time to put together that binder that we talked about in the last webinar, bring that with you. Make sure you have a copy of your child's test results and any other private testing that you had. Have that in there along with your notes that you're prepared to ask questions with. Secondly, I want you to take a deep breath. Okay, parents, you know what? You don't have to know everything. This is, especially if this is your first IEP meeting, take a breath and realize you're embarking upon a new journey. And it's going to feel overwhelming at first. There's going to be a lot of things that are talked about, resources and different individuals that are going to be helping you that you've never even walked across that bridge before. So just take a breath and be easy with yourself. And you'll feel a little bit of relief now that you have an identification of what your child needs. You'll have some professionals that you'll have met through that testing process, get to know them a little bit. I became fast friends with my son's speech therapist, and that was, oh goodness, almost 20 years ago. And we are still friends today, but she was an integral part in his education program throughout the years because she understood him. She knew what I wanted. And that leads into number 3, building relationships and getting to know who's going to be working with your child, who's going to be adding input, and really talk to them and express those questions that you have with those individuals. I think it's really important to keep in mind that these people are getting really involved with your child's education plan. And so it's important that you show your appreciation. Write a quick note, maybe once a quarter or every couple months, and tell them thank you for the help that they're doing. It keeps people motivated. I think that's just a nice little touch from parents to say, hey, I appreciate the extra effort that you're giving towards making sure that my child makes progress on their goals. So I think that it's good to just stay focused on what individuals are coming along. Teachers, keep in mind, a lot of times I'll get parents that they'll give me this long list, this laundry list of things, and they tend to forget that teacher has maybe 20 some other students in their class. And so it's important to, while you're building those relationships, keep in mind the gravity of work that is on the teacher and really show that you are a vested party in this activity that you're doing, this program.
Tara,
yes.
Let me ask you, when you're building these relationships, does a parent, should they be looking at a lot of these people they're building these relationships with as building really allies for their child?
Yes. And, that's a good question, Paul. You're going to come across some individuals that are highly motivated to be your ally, like I did with that speech therapist, and then later the occupational therapist. Then you might come across some individuals that really don't want to be your ally. They may have a stark difference in opinion as to what resources should be provided or what they think is best for your child. Perfect example, our physical therapist, when my son was in elementary school, really did not believe that he should be schooled in his neighborhood school. And she told me daily, every time she met with him, she says, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know why you just don't put him in that little program with these other kids like him. And I was so appalled. And I said, because his sisters go to school here and our house is just down the road. And these are the individuals that he's going to see on a daily basis. And he deserves the right to learn along with his typical peers, just like everyone else. And so I think you got to keep in mind that some will willingly be your ally and be prepared to fend off those that aren't, but realize that you have to build a working relationship. Again, questions, communication, I think are the most important, whether they're right there toe in the path with you or they're bucking you on things. And keep notes of both of those relationships. Keep notes. And, I always say kill them with kindness. Those notes go a long way. Maybe their angst is that they had a bad experience with another child and they're taking it out. I got a lot. My son has Down syndrome. So Sam got pigeonholed into anybody and everybody they ever met with Down syndrome. And that was going to be his future development. And I said, you know what? He's an individual. And I always reverted back to the name of this program. It's Individual Education Program. And usually that bad day or that bad attitude was turned around by the end of the year. I only had one experience out of all his years in school that we just couldn't see eye to eye. And it was nice to shake hands and say, I'm going to ask for someone to replace you. And so you can do that too, parents. That's your right. Your right is to say, this is not working. Okay.
And I know I want to
fourth. Oh, go ahead.
I know that you advised on the first webinar that feel free to encourage parents to bring someone with them. I know
Yes.
that your therapist became a fast friend, and that was somebody who you were able to bring to add some perspective, to be that listening ear, and to be able to recount. And so I wanted to just let our viewers know that that's also something that you said is very, very important, to have somebody with you. And also the notes that you talked about, if something happens and I'm trying to think about how you framed it, which was so diplomatic, in case they just forgot, or in case there was just some miscommunication. When you have your notes, you can refer back to those notes and say, no, because on January 4th, you said such and so. And so I just want to follow up with that. And I just thought that was so good. So when you're talking about building relationships and asking questions, to have somebody there that can help you, and it's just great. And this is just great.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention that again, but yes, your care person, I found whoever I could get to go with me to take those notes. And, oftentimes professionals that work with the school district, if you're in a public setting, and this was my experience and several others that I have talked to, they're not allowed to say, they're told ahead of time, don't offer this. Don't tell the parent that we have these resources. If the parent doesn't ask, you don't disclose it until they ask. I always felt like I was embarking upon a foreign land and they spoke a completely different language. And unless I knew exactly the question to ask, I was not going to get the information. It was really frustrating. Well, because I brought someone with me, they could catch some of those signals and pass me little notes in the meeting. But also those therapists becoming allies with them, they were struggling to provide services for other students as well. And so I was able to help them. There was a time where and I may have mentioned this in a previous webinar, they presented me with 3 pages, this one particular therapist, 3 pages of resources that they needed for not just my son would benefit, but other students within the school and the district. And they said, when you go and ask again for something that had been denied in our meeting to the director of special ed, would you mind just seeing if you could get them to sign this paper for these resources? And I said, well, why aren't you asking? And they said, they won't give them to us. And these other parents don't know. And I said, well, I'll go in there. And so I did 3 pages. It was over $3,000 worth of curriculum to help these students. And, I just sat there in that office and just kept talking to her as to why it would be a benefit, not just for my son, but I counted out how many students could benefit from this. And, she finally signed it because I think she wanted to go home to dinner. And, the therapist said, I was hoping to just get the first page. And I said, you know what? You got to go for the whole whale, go for the whale and hope that you get at least a couple fins, off of somebody. So we ended up linking together, and I helped not just my son, but many other children. The parents don't even know that I was behind that. But I thought, you know what, we got to work together. Mm-hmm. And we still laugh about that. I saw her a couple weeks ago and I said, you know what, that was pretty clever. So, and it was for the benefit, and the school was better because of it. So, let's go on to number 4. You want to show up ready to discuss and be an active leader on your team. Parents oftentimes want to sit back, and this is where the binder comes into play, and you come being organized and ready, but also have your evaluation, your extra information in it, but be ready to be a leader. And Tiffany did so well in mentioning, when you write everything down, it gives you an opportunity to recall that easily. And you don't have to there's no argument because it's written down. And that's the same place. So be ready to discuss and be active in the discussion of your child and what everybody has to say about them and their suggestions. understand that you, the parent, are the most advised individual on that student. So though, Susie's speech therapist comes along and has 25 years speech and language experience, you want to capitalize on that experience, but you want to understand that that experience has yet to be proven with your child. And so if you sit back and let her come up with the whole speech plan, and I'm sorry, I use speech a lot just because it was so prominent with my son, but if you let her come up with the whole plan, they're not going to really know what your child, the ins and outs of your child. So I suggest that you come ready to be active and participate. And that's why asking questions, having your materials in front of you, and be okay with saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Please, let's back up and cover that section again. It's a good way to handle things. And then finally, the fifth one is focus on the most important concerns at the meeting. I have sat in on hundreds of meetings, and I was in one most recently where they got sidetracked over and over. Hours were wasted. And I say wasted because those things could have been taken care of before the meeting, or a note made and talked about before you signed the document. So it's really important that if you're provided a draft copy of the IEP, because keep in mind, parents, the teachers and the therapists are spending a significant amount of time outside of that meeting preparing based upon the evaluation. They're preparing a draft of this document, as they should be. Now, it's okay. Some people don't want a draft. They want to sit there and go section after section, but there are a lot of sections to this, and it takes hours. So any draft work that can be done ahead of time, you don't have to sign it. You don't even have to agree to it. But the fact that you have a shell to preview is wonderful. I always asked for 48 hours time to get the draft before the meeting. They don't have to do a draft. Some states, I think there might be, I don't know for certain, but I heard that some states you're not allowed to do a draft. It's not required, but you can request a draft of what their ideas are so you can review it. And then if you have the time to send them a list of notes ahead of time before the meeting, then that gives them a little bit of thought process about what your concerns are. So I think that then when you're at the meeting, you can focus on the most important topics and not get hung up on the fact that you changed an address and that Johnny needs different transportation. So I think that's really important there. Let the professional, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, if you don't, and I just want to be clear on this. If you ask for those 48 hours and you take the time and you review your IEP and you find something that you don't think is right, or that he needs more of, or she needs something added or taken away, are you able to request that? How does that
Oh, absolutely.
work? Okay.
Yes, the draft is simply that. It's their suggestions. And I had to go back to the table almost every IEP to request more minutes for therapies. They would give me the absolute minimum requirement. And I would always have to go back and say, 10 minutes of speech, by the time you get him out of class and get him to the hallway, you're taking him back. That's ridiculous. Let's look. And I would always point back to the evaluation team report, the ETR. I would always go back there and say, let's look at what they're saying, what his deficits are. Now, how in the world is 10 minutes going to do anything for him? And so that's why you want those hours ahead of time to look at their draft to see what they're thinking. And that's why it's important to go over it. Don't just take that piece of paper and go, I got my 8 o'clock show on tonight. I really don't have time to be looking at this thing. And I confess, it's not the best read in the world. It's not going to be as entertaining as maybe your People magazine or something else, but sit down and really go through it and have a second person look at it with you, because it's easy to miss things. And, when I review it with parents, I take a highlighter, I make a copy and I take a highlighter and I highlight the things that the parent told me are the most important, because parents, you want to be the one making those decisions. But sometimes you miss things, and we as parents oftentimes will get hung up on one thing and realize that we needed to step over to something else. So absolutely, you can make that request. And again, you haven't signed anything. And it is just a draft, because your rights are that you get to give equal participation into each one of those goals, each one of those therapies. So it has to be a discussion. That's really just the springboard, the draft, if they provide you with one. I encourage you to let the professionals on the team deal with the meat and potatoes of the document. They're responsible to make sure that every section is filled out properly. You're responsible to review it and make sure that you agree with it. There are a couple sections that I feel are essential for parents to really pay attention to. And I'd like to go over those now if we can. I call my parent priorities. And I think the whole document is a priority. However, I think these particular sections just need a little extra care because you can get lost in here. The first one is the very first section of the IEP, the future planning. Now, I've talked to some parents that said that their school districts don't even go over future planning. And then I've talked to some parents that said they just had it all written out of what Johnny and Susie were going to do by the time they graduated, and they stuck to it the whole way through. And then I had some parents say, oh my goodness, that would be so overwhelming and really kind of disappointing for me because we've got all these issues that we need to address. For me personally, I think each parent's going to be different. But for me, future planning gave me as a parent an opportunity to dream, you know, kind of like a vision of what my son could be. And so it's really important. I looked at what our state says about future planning, and they define it as a statement that discusses the child's future. And it ensures that the family and child's preferences and interests are an essential part of the planning process. And I think that's a really key thing to remember. Future could mean next grading period. It could mean this entire year, or it could mean when my child graduates 13 years from now, I hope that they're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I have to tell you, I made a sample, and that'll be posted up with the resources in a couple days, but I made some samples. I looked back at my son's future plans, and they changed every single year. His first future plan, and I'll just read this for you. We used the same plan, kindergarten through first grade, because we were running, and mine, I gave them my input. I wrote a little, paragraph, and this is what they put in that future plan. Mom would like to see S reading, writing, and understanding basic math concepts. She would also like him to respect authority and function appropriately in the school setting. S will have opportunities to gain self-confidence, fit into society, and develop friendships that will stay with him. Now, that was politely saying my son had a behavior issue. He didn't have any friends, and he couldn't read or write. And he certainly couldn't tell time or do math. And I can state that specifically, but those were my concerns. I wanted him to respect authority, to build some confidence. I wanted him to fit into society. I wanted him to have some friends. He saw that his sisters had friends, but he wasn't making friends. And part of it was because of his behavior. And his behavior was a problem because of his frustration, because he had a speech delay, his comprehension. So parents, that future plan stayed with us for several years. And as Samuel started gaining friendships and becoming a little more aware of himself and gaining skills, we were able to change it. And I can honestly say by the time that we got to his high school and transition years, his future plan led him directly to where he is right now, working in the community. He has a ton of friends. He's been all over, the country, advocating for other students like himself. And we can't go anywhere in town without somebody knowing him. And that may not be the case for everyone, but I watched him as he progressed through school, and I took note of what he was good at and where he had shortcomings. And then I asked him, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it changed consistently. He wanted to go to college. Well, then I gave him a prep test, and he's like, this is way too hard. And I said, okay, would you like a job? Oh, yes, I think I'd like a job. So we revisited things. And, it helped me as a mom have hope because he chose his life. And I was able to let die those dreams that maybe would never be because, we as parents, we always kind of start off with every child thinking, oh, they're going to be this or that. And then if we're letting them grow and foster to be who they were intended to be, they dictate what they become with our support. So I want to encourage you with that. Future planning, so important for parents to give their input and be willing to change it as you see your child develop. And you'll be surprised at the outcome, I promise you. And don't go ahead.
You said you were going to put that in the resources, so we'll have that at louisianaforchildren.org/special needs.
Yes, I will.
We've
I
got
will
that
get
on
that
the
submitted.
screen.
Yeah, and you'll have 4 or 5 different samples. I'll show the progression so parents can get an idea of what I did. Again, it's just a springboard because it's hard. As a parent, I didn't know what to say that first meeting. I was like, I just want him to behave, but I wanted other things too. And so that was a key piece for me to have hope that he was going to be a well-adjusted citizen one day. So I want parents also to be encouraged.
Now, so far you've shared, several tips, and I could almost envision a parent sitting there going, I've got to do this. I've got to do all this perfectly. So I'm sure you have some advice for a parent to know that, you're not going to be able to check every box the first
No.
time and,
Yes.
and keep going, right?
That's right. Parents, I had somebody say to me a couple months ago, "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't understand because it just seems like you've got everything so perfect and you've got it all put together." And I laughed hysterically. I said, "Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? You didn't see yesterday when we were arguing about his work time sheet and how it became a huge kerfuffle, or when I was going into that first IEP meeting, I had no idea what I was talking about. And I thought to bring a support person, I thought they weren't going to give me anything that I asked for. So I invited the entire neighborhood. 16 support people showed up to help me. There wasn't even room for everybody. And I didn't even know what to ask for. I know, it was crazy. And I even invited the state coalition team to come because I thought we were going to go to due process. And they were shocked when they said they gave you everything you asked for. And I said, well, the reason is because I took one bite at a time. I wanted my son to go to school in his neighborhood. That was my first and most important thing, and to be treated just like his sisters. Now, was that overstretching a little bit? Well, yes, because they didn't even have any special resources at that school. But then they brought them because they knew they had to. And then I met teachers and therapists that came along and gave me advice, and I took it. And I decided for me, what worked best was I wasn't going to be quiet and mousy, and I wasn't going to be a tyrant and beat the door down, but I was going to meet them in the middle. And I was going to do my part, which was to ask questions and not be afraid to not know what I was talking about.
So
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what was the most overwhelming part? There's so many facets of the IEP, and there's so many lines in the process that we are learning. So when you were working, trying to make sure that Samuel had what he needed, what was the thing that just really, really caused you to have to take a step back and then reassess and then go back at it? What's the most overwhelming part about?
The most overwhelming part is that it was like learning a whole new language. It was like getting dropped off in a foreign country, and I didn't know anything. I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what they were talking about, and they didn't seem to have any expectation of my child. They wanted me to drop him off and walk away and let them do what they do. And I'm like, but you don't know him. And they judged his behaviors as that he was a bad kid. And I knew he was just frustrated. And we found out in that first grading period that he couldn't hear. So for all those years, he was 6 years old and he couldn't hear. And so of course he was frustrated. So I knew I knew my son. And I knew that they needed my help, even though they told me they didn't. So it was overwhelming. And probably the part about the overwhelming part was that they didn't trust that as a parent, I knew him better than anyone else. So I overcame that by, again, thanking them over and over. Anyone that met me in the middle, I thanked them. And I really tried to kill them with kindness. I really tried to pull from them whatever I could get them to give me to help understand my son. And then I took one chunk at a time. So when I figured out that I really didn't know how to plan for his future, I picked one thing, and it was really the friendships at first. Then I looked at when they started presenting like the second section, which is section 3 on the IEP, the profile. And they just listed immediately negative, 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 everything they found on that report. And I stopped them during that second meeting and I said, you know what? He's more than those numbers. He's more than an IQ number. He's more than data that you collected during testing that was really overwhelming for him. So I told them about him. And that kind of leads into my next piece. And there will be a resource on this on your resource page when I upload the other ones. I wrote an introductory statement about Samuel because that's all I knew. I knew him and I knew what he liked and what he didn't like. And I wanted them to like him. And so I wrote, these are things I like and these are things I don't like. And I put it as if he was talking. For example, I like to be praised for a good job. Enthusiasm and positive verbal reinforcement help me stay motivated. I like a choice. I like a clear routine. I like consistency. I like to have friends that help show me how to do something instead of just telling me. I like to be part of a group. I need time to complete my task without being asked over and over. And there it goes on. And then I put things I do not like. I do not like loud noises. He used to run. I don't like it when people yell at me or use mean voices with me. I don't like to be rushed or hurried. So I made a picture. I copied his picture and I put it on this likes and dislikes page. And I gave it to every single person that was going to be working with him. The janitor, the gym teacher, the teacher. I didn't have a copy machine. So I went up to the school and I asked if they could make a copy of it. I know. And I passed it out to everybody. And so everybody got to know him. And it was a really cute picture too. I suggest you find your cutest picture of your child and you march on up there and you present it. And then speak highly of your child. Encourage them to praise your child, because oftentimes, especially in the situation of behavior, kids get a bad rap because they do have bad behaviors. But I think it's because they're frustrated or they feel like they're in a foreign country and they don't know the language. So it is an onion, it's a head of cabbage, the IEP process. It's overwhelming and very frustrating, but one chunk at a time, one section at a time. That's why I said in my tips, and the parents will have that on that resource page, let the professionals do the bulk of it. Don't try to, I have to say, I tried to get my PhD in special ed through reading all those books. I don't advise that. I advise you to go to the websites that we've provided you with and just pick out the key facts that we've talked about. Stay focused. Don't overwhelm yourself with every section, but really focus on just what you can control and then utilize the resources. Here's a statement that I found is very useful. When speaking to whoever the professional is that's working with your child, say things like, Mrs. Jones, I know that you have 15 years experience working with children, and that's why I'm asking you this question, because I really appreciate and admire your expertise in this area. Mrs. Jones is going to be more willing to tell you what she thinks in a pleasurable manner because you just flattered her in a really respectful way and meaningful way. You weren't candy coating it. You really do respect her expertise. At the end of the day, you guys may disagree on things, but now you have an open door to collaborate, as opposed to saying, you don't know my child and I don't want to hear what you have to say. I want, or I'm not going to do it that way. Same thing with the speech and language therapist and the OT. I would say to them, could I come up and sit in on a session? Because I see you do all these amazing things with him. And I want to be able to do those things at home too, because I don't know anything about this. I've had him for 7 years and I haven't been able to get him to enunciate his sounds. I can't understand him when he speaks, but you have been able to get him to speak words that we couldn't get him to do in years. Could I sit in because you are amazing at this? Well, I was sitting in on lessons all the time. They were sending me notes home, giving me suggestions on Christmas presents that would be good for him. I mean, the OT would go through my game closet at home and all of Sam's toys, and she made me a list. I still have it today. She made me a list of all the different ways you can use puzzles and games and activities to help Samuel become better with his occupational skills. Why? Because I appreciated her expertise and I admitted my shortcomings there. I'm like, I don't know this. People love to tout what they know about. So I encourage you parents to use that in your favor, and they will come alongside you. And, collaborating together goes so much further than doing it all by yourself. Really does.
You use the word collaborating. Do, like in let's say in a specific school, do parents ever get together or is that recommended that parents get together and I guess maybe not necessarily pool resources, but maybe just, their collective influence on the
That's,
classroom, on the teacher.
yeah, that's
Is that
great, Paul.
recommended?
Two things.
And
Two
we've got
things on that.
some teachers online watching, so that's why I'm asking that too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Couple things. We had some neighboring school districts. In one particular district, the parents did unite, and the parents got together and they said, we need these resources. And they went to the district together. And the district, it was the favorite district. And I tried so hard to get my son into that district, and they didn't do open enrollment. And I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. And so I couldn't put out the cash that they wanted to send him there. But these parents had the Cadillac version of education in the special ed department. Over the course of the last 20 years, I only know of 2 instances where parents filed a grievance that I'm aware of with that school. And those kids graduated with an exceptional learning experience. So that is a perfect example of a school district that did it right and parents that united. They were more of a village. They were a village school, and we were more of an urban city school. So they had fewer students, but they really put forth, they had a very large, parents moved into that district to go to that school, that public school. Then we had, when I was able to get the law passed here, to help with the law here, and we were able to get choice, and I put my son into the private setting and actually ran that program. He received a lot more funding than any other, because of his category. And you can't take money from one kid. You can't put the scholarship dollars into a pot and spread it, evenly disperse it like you can in the public school. However, I looked at that and I said, he benefits from all this speech therapy, but he'd benefit more at his age that he was at if he was able to have group therapy. So I talked to the parents. As a parent, I said, listen, I asked the speech therapist, she's willing to work on his goals and offer group therapy. And I'm willing to spread the wealth around a little bit because we would like to have some group therapy sessions. So we were able to collaborate that way. The same thing with resources. He needed some tools. And that's what I mentioned about the speech therapist, asking for those supports. That's how I presented it to that director of special ed. I said, he needs all of these things. But wouldn't it be ridiculous for you to spend $3,000 on one student? I mean, that would be wasteful on my part as a parent. However, I know there's 32 other students in your district that would benefit from those resources. And if you acquisition this to this child, why not spread the wealth and share it with all of them? And she sat and she shook her head. And she said, those parents didn't ask for that. I said, they didn't because they didn't know that they could. And I'm here to lobby for all of them. So yes, collaborating together. And that was because the speech therapist and the teachers got together and said, if we could only have more resources and work with these students, we could get it done. And I said, I'm your girl. I'll go in and ask for it because teachers need help. They can't all get an aide. I think every teacher in every classroom should have an aide. There should be a teacher and an aide in every classroom, whether there's students with special needs in there or not. I'm sorry. Teachers are overworked. And I don't care where they're at, whether they're a private program, a public program, charter, whatever. They all need an assistant. And then I really think that we should work together and we should pool resources. Paul, I love your idea of uniting and getting parents together at a coffee shop and drawing up who's got what and who has what need, and then talking to the teachers and saying, hey, teachers, what we were able to get done through that speech and OT, I'm telling you what, so many kids benefited. And then I did tell parents that came along after, I said, hey, these are the people you go to. This is how you help, but be willing to share the wealth. Nobody being stingy benefits. In the end, everybody comes up shortchanged. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does.
I think working together works so much better. And we had one mom who kept secrets. And you know what? She always ended up alone. And I thought, well, it's because, we were taught in elementary and preschool, share. So I think we should do that. One of the things that I'll go through a couple more of these sections and feel free to jump in there. Transition planning. Now, it's not required in the IEP planning process to address this specifically until the child gets to 14. You start talking about it, and then 16. I think those are the years, and if I'm off on that, correct me. But I think it's essential to backwards plan. I think it's so important to plan with the end in mind. One thing that I noticed in elementary school was they were just focusing on the academic aspect of my child, while his deficits affected his education and his ability to learn in all areas. And book work, lecture, writing, testing, he was not going to learn that way. And I knew that he needed a different type of learning. He needed hands-on functional learning, and he needed life skills as well. So I really thought it was important to always be looking with the future in mind, regardless, because if he couldn't get his behaviors together, we were going to be looking at some therapy and counseling. If he couldn't get his speech together, we were going to be looking at ongoing speech and language. And so that transition piece is so important, to be thinking about what's going to come next, because it wouldn't be beneficial for him to go down a college prep track if he was going to go vocational. So we have to be looking at that. So I encourage parents to just kind of take a look. What is your child interested in? Where are they at right now? And look at what your vision for the future is, what your future plan suggestions are, and always be thinking about the end in mind. And we ended up with a teacher when Samuel was, I think, going into the 8th grade, who finally got that with me. And when she said it, I was like, I love you. And she understood. I felt like I met my soulmate. And she said, we got a plan for what's going to happen. And I said, I couldn't ever get anybody to look at that. They said, oh, that section's not required. We'll wait till later. And I said, no, let's look at it now, because it'll save a ton of work later. And when I ran my program at the private school, every parent, first thing out the gate is I'd say, what are we going to do for transition? What is the end of the life going to look like? When this child walks out the door at graduation, what do we need to have them ready for? Because if they came to me and they couldn't tie their shoes, I had one gal, couldn't put a ponytail in her hair, couldn't do it herself. She was fully ambulatory. I know some individuals have difficulty with their fingers and hands, but mom had always done it. And I said, is she going to live with you forever? Well, we hope not. I said, well, let's start with getting that ponytail in. We got to focus with it when she goes to work. Is she going to be able to do her own hair? Or is she going to walk up to the job supervisor and ask them to put her hair back for her? That's not going to go over. And, simple little things, tying their shoes. Remember, I had a child with multiple disabilities. So if I'm speaking and your child just needs some reading helps, disregard those comments. But for those, I always think with the greatest need in mind. Let's think of if that child is non-communicative and they're going to need an instructional technology piece. Well, we got to be thinking about that now. We don't want to wait until they're a junior or senior and then just now start teaching them how to use that communication device. We need to be looking at that now so that they can access, or if they need a motorized wheelchair, or if they need ambulatory aids. We've got to be looking with the future in mind. And it's kind of like this. It's like the wave. I always say we're going to go forwards and backwards constantly, but it keeps it beautiful.
Do you find that most schools or do they talk to parents in the beginning about their transition plan, or is that something that the parent needs to bring up, or is that something in the mind of schools?
Well, it's not required by law or by the document until age 14. That's when it's required that you look at it, and then it's actually required at 16. And so my experience has been very, very few look at it ahead of time. Now, I have come across one or two that have said, oh yeah, we're always backwards planning. We're looking at where are we going to end up? What's our goal at the end? Okay, let's move backwards. What do we have to do each year to get that child to that point? They're usually looking from an academic standpoint. Now, if you're one of those schools or one of those districts that really is all in on that IEP, I am kudos to you. But usually the parent has to take the lead on looking at that ahead of time. And again, you mentioned it earlier, Paul, there's so much. It's that another layer of that cabbage. The parent's like, are you kidding? Another section I have to worry about? But if you just take one at a time, check it off, go to the next one, check it off. And again, you're just making a statement. Johnny wants to be able to work in the mechanics garage. Okay, well, what type of skills does he need to have to get there? We were adjusting when Samuel from the 8th grade to the 12th grade, and then his additional 2 years that he went to school, we were constantly adjusting his academics and his life skill training to accommodate where he thought he wanted to be in the workforce. And it was because of that transition piece. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask, how often are you reevaluated with the IEP?
It's required once per year. However, you are allowed to call an IEP meeting. Anyone on the team is allowed to call an IEP meeting anytime I encourage parents to limit, unless there's really something going awry. You might have to make an addendum. Maybe you needed, maybe the child needed a wheelchair mid-year and you needed to reevaluate that and get that added on. You can do an addendum to it. But minimum is once a year. You have to do an IEP meeting.
And so when you talk about the transition process, when you start looking at the transition planning, or every year you have an opportunity to be looking forward because
Yes.
you're having a reevaluation. So is that an
Yes.
opportunity for you to look at what the goals were? Did we meet those goals? And so I'm thinking that would be something good to put in your notes.
Yes.
In
Yes,
a
absolutely.
binder.
Right, because maybe you're new and you get through that kindergarten year and you're like, I'm just going to focus on my job going into this meeting is to meet everybody, to have an idea of what I want the future of my child to look like, and a little profile statement. The little profile piece about here's a little bit about my child. And I'm going to leave the goals and objectives and services. I'm going to check the minutes on that, but I'm going to leave the rest of that to the team. Maybe you just want to cover 2 little sections. And make sure that your support person, checks all the, dots all the I's and crosses all the T's on everything else, and you're good with that. And then next year you're like, I got that future plan statement and that vision under control, and they already know I've already given input. No, by the way, Johnny added this little quirk to his, all about me statement. I want to put that in there, and he's got some new likes and dislikes. But this time now I want to really, let's look at what's going to happen down the road when he gets to junior high. And that's what happens. That's the whole point for me with the transition piece is, I tend to take things in chunks, like transitioning from elementary to junior high, transitioning from junior high to high school. And then as soon as they hit like 8th grade, 9th grade, what's it going to look like at graduation? So you can chunk everything down, but again, it's like that little bite at a time. And then parents are starting to feel empowered. Teachers start to take you, more seriously. And the administration says this parent's really they're going to come on board and they're going to come alongside us. And, I think at the end of the day, in my Pollyanna-ish way of thinking, everybody wants a good outcome. I think some people just get burdened and overwhelmed. I think parents sometimes come to the table completely in the dark. And then if they're not treated with respect just out the gate, because they're treated like a number, because maybe you do have 250 IEPs to get through that year because you're a super large school district and you just want to push them through. But you know what? That's not going to service anybody well in the end. So I like to believe that the more the parent comes alongside the school district and the teachers and the therapists, the more they're going to come alongside them. Now, I say that, and then in my particular case, that didn't happen. And I had my teachers on board, I had my therapist on board, but the administration was bent on moving him across town into this one particular hub. And he's not going to amount to anything but a sheltered workshop, and he'll never hold a job. And I just wasn't accepting that. I said, you know what? We have to try something different. And that's where choice comes in. If your state doesn't have it, we got to work to get it. And if it does have it, we got to work to get you to be able to choose it if you so need it. It's important.
Well, I certainly thank you for the information, and I know that our parents do. And I want to encourage parents and teachers, if you're watching and you have questions, you can text your questions to Tara at 52886. And of course, I encourage you to do so if you don't want to ask questions now, but you're welcome to ask your questions now and Tara can answer it. If you need some time to kind of evaluate or review what has been discussed today and you think about a question, please text her at 52886. 52886.
There's just one more thing I really want to mention in the areas of the IEP for today, to not go on too long, but the specifically designed accommodations and services. It's really important for you, the parent, and your support person to go over that section in detail. That is where one time I didn't know, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know that was so important. I didn't know that was the money bag, that was the purse strings. And they had taken out a therapy without my approval, and I didn't look at it thoroughly enough. I helped another mom. I said, hey, they took out your service and they took out all the minutes, and they had agreed verbally in the Zoom meeting that they weren't going to. And then when they handed her the document to sign, they had taken it out. It was a little sneaky little thing that they did, and that happens a lot. So I really think that under that section, you really need to look specifically under specific, and I believe it's section 7 on the IEP form. And I know every state isn't the same. So specifically designed accommodations and services, but look and see what they're agreeing to provide you, and make sure that you agree with every single section and any changes that have been made. And this is where, if you visit your state parent training center, your specific state will help you with that. Ohio has an incredible coalition. They've got so many resources on there, and they taught me so much. And they actually, I looked at a variety of different states, and most of the support centers offer downloads that you can download booklets. And again, don't download everything. Download just the area that you need help with, because you'll get overwhelmed. But you can go to rightslaw.com. Now, I will warn you, rightslaw.com, it is law speak and it's overwhelming, but you can type in some questions and get some immediate answers to what your specific rights are. If you're getting tangled up into the school district really not being willing to work with you, you can go there and find out specific helps and rights. And again, have a support person. And if you don't understand, call someone in your parent support center for your state and ask them to help explain that to you. Remember, you don't have to sign the IEP until you agree to all of it, and never sign it until you've had a little bit of time to digest it. I always took a copy with me home when we met in person. When we did virtual school, I printed it off and I scoured it for a couple days because it's very lengthy. And you can call another meeting, but again, if you sign it, you're agreeing to the terms in it. And then it's hard to go backwards if something's been taken out. And remember, under goals and objectives, I encouraged parents, even though I really encourage the teachers to write those goals and objectives, I encourage parents. We have a laundry list, moms and dads. We have a laundry list of all these fixes that we want you to do on our children each year. But realistically, we can only work on and report on no more than 6 goals in a year. And that's including speech and language and OT and PT. I mean, you really want no more than 3 academic goals and 2 to 3 maximum objectives. If you're asking for the sun, moon, and stars on that, you can be guaranteed that your progress reporting is going to be really watered down, and you're not going to meet a lot of those goals because it's just too much, And you can always, if your child masters the goal, you can always call a meeting and add a new one. And I recommend that if you have more goals than that, put it in your profile section. Have the teacher say, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, I would really like it. I know we're not going to work on, algebraic equations this semester because he doesn't even know how to add and subtract. But could you put it in there that's my future goal there? Put it in there, or whatever the next piece is that you want them to work on. Put it under the end of the profile." My teachers were always willing to do that. I know they chuckled when I left the meeting. They're like, "Oh, that Mrs. Myers." But you know what? I wasn't there to, become their best friend. I was there to make sure that the services were met. And, I encourage you to stay focused on just a few things at each meeting. Give the teachers what they can work with. Don't expect them to be burning the midnight oil because they got other kids in the class, but you want them to be successful so you can cheer them on, and you want your child to make progress. So, I'm going to wrap it up with that right there because I could go on for days.
All right. And we did get a request to repeat the text information, and it is text TERA to 52886. Text Tera, TERA, to 52886.
And Tara, I just want to thank you again for your willingness to come on and to share this information. We, the 3 of us, spend a lot of time in our professional life advocating school choice. And I think the importance of, or what is helpful with school choice is having all the information so that you can make the choice. And so we have these kinds of webinars, and we'll continue to have these kind of webinars as a way to empower parents. We want you to have choice, but we want you to be able to make the choices that are going to help your children and your family. So again, Tara, thank you for coming on. Of course, we have more to this webinar series. And so please, parents and viewers, pay attention to. You can go and find us at the Louisiana Federation for Children on Facebook. We always have our information posted there and information on how to contact us, contact Tara, and also be able to review some of the other webinars that we've had to help you as you continue to navigate this process. And remember, the Louisiana Parent Network has a lot of great information. We keep it up to date, not only on school choice matters, but not only for private school, it's for all schools, it's for all parents. That if you want to log on and you want to find information that is affecting us right now, because of course we're in the middle of a pandemic, things are changing. You can get your information from that site. So we want to encourage you, the Louisiana Federation for Children, the Louisiana Parent Network. Also, if you have questions regarding the information, text Tara, Tera, at 52886. And we will be coming back in a few weeks to give you some more information to help you on this education school choice journey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.